Okay, all right, we're going to begin our lesson this week with a challenge. So here's the challenge. I am going to, for me and you, I am going to toss this ball up and down in the air, and I want you to count how many times that I'm able to catch the ball. Are you ready? Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Here we go. All right. Now, did you count how many times I caught the ball? I counted 25. Does anyone know how many fingers I was holding up on this hand while I did it? I know, that might be trickier to guess because it's not what I asked you to look at. I asked you to count this, but I was holding up 3 fingers. In today's lesson, we are going to hear about some Jewish leaders that were so worried about their people following their laws that they totally missed the big picture of what Jesus was doing. For our Jam City question of the lesson, we have some adults that are going to tell us about times in their life when they missed out on something or someone missed out on something for them because they were looking at something else.
So I really missed out on something when I was a kid. I was about first grade and I was in the hospital and I was very sick with a really bad infection. And I was there for about 9 days. After about 3 days, I started to feel better and the nurses wanted me to come out and play. And they asked me to go down to the playroom and I wouldn't do it. I said no, I was too scared. Even with my mom going with me, I was too scared. And so for 9 days, I laid in the bed all by myself in my room, except when my mom was there to visit. On the last day, we went down the hall to say bye to everybody when I was leaving, and we went in the playroom. And I saw all the fun that I had missed. They were making things and playing games and having so much fun. So while I was in my room, I really missed out on some really fun stuff because I was afraid. Thanks.
Hey, Mr. Ross here. I miss all my kiddos. I heard that we're talking about stories of times that we might have missed things in life. And I was thinking back when I was young, and a story came to my mind. I remember when I was playing baseball when I was young, and it's not something that I missed, but somebody else did. I had to go to a baseball game a long ways away. So I went with one of my teammates, and my parents were going to come later on when my dad got off of work. So we drove all the way about an hour and a half or 2 hours to my field with my teammate, and the whole field was flooded. And we were not able to play on that field, and it got changed to a different field. Well, back then, we didn't have cell phones like we do now, so we had no way of telling my parents what field we were going to. So, long time later, my parents show up at the field and they see that it's flooded and they don't find anybody there. So they don't know what's going on. They think, well, I guess the game got canceled. So they turn around and drove all the way back home. Well, that day, at the other field we went to, I hit my very first home run, and my parents missed it. They were very, very sad, but they were very happy for me too. And that's just how it is in life sometimes. Sometimes we miss things, and there's nothing we can do about it. We don't know why it happens, but we just have to see the best in whatever goes on and realize that's life. Hey, I look forward to seeing everybody real soon.
So my son Baker just turned 1, and he likes to explore, and he recently learned how to climb onto the couch. So the other day he did that, climbed on the couch, and I looked away for just a second, and when we looked back, he had gone from the couch onto the side table next to the couch and was just sitting there on his rump, just pleased as punch. So that was fun.
Today our story comes from the Gospel of John. Let's go ahead and say the Gospels together. There's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And if you're looking for a story about Jesus' times here on earth, then the Gospels are going to be where you want to look. So today's story is from John chapter 5. And if you have your Bible, go ahead and take a minute and find John chapter 5. Now, our story takes place today in Jerusalem. And it tells us in John 5 that Jesus was in Jerusalem to celebrate a festival. Just like, remember when they celebrated Passover, all the Jewish people would come to Israel to worship and to celebrate. So Jesus is in Jerusalem to have a celebration, and that's where our story takes place. Now, usually we tell our story with pictures, but that was getting boring. So I thought we would do something different today. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about the setting of the story. So we know it's in Jerusalem, and it is near, the Bible tells us. Remember, Mrs. Griffith and Mrs. Williams showed us the map of Jerusalem, and it had all the walls around it to protect it. And the only way to get in and out of the walls was to go through one of the gates along the walls. And remember, all the gates had different names, and some of them had very funny names. But this story takes place near the wall, near the sheep gate. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to build a sheep gate here. So we're going to pretend, if you use your imagination a little bit, this right here is going to be the gate, and we've got our walls, and we're going to put some sheep near it. There we go. Probably the place where the sheep went in and out of the city, out to go eat their grass and back in to be protected. So our story takes place near the sheep gate in a place called the Pool of Bethesda. Now, sort of like a swimming pool, but you have to remember back in Jesus' times, most people did not have running water or did not have running water in their house. And so what the city did is it kind of had pools that were usually fed by springs or cisterns, and people could go there and essentially bathe, or some of the pools were used to let their animals drink water. But this pool, the Pool of Bethesda, near the sheep gate, many people in the city of Jerusalem believed that this pool would heal you. So I don't know exactly why people believed that. There's several different stories, none of which are in the Bible, but that why people believed that this pool had healing powers. It could have just been that if you were feeling sick or achy, something about the water helped you feel a little bit better. But for whatever the reason, people who were sick or their bodies hurt in some way, they would gather around this pool. So we are going to go ahead and put people all around the pool. Oops, not in the pool, just around the pool. And it was often very crowded. Now, the cool thing is that archaeologists have actually found where the Pool of Bethesda was in Old Jerusalem. And I have a picture here. Well, here, let me show you first a picture of what an artist thinks it may have looked like at the time of Jesus. Now remember, this is just a drawing. So let me get a little bit closer so you can see. All right, so you have the columns, and there's the pool, and it was crowded. There's Jesus. All right, so kind of see what that looks like. Now, the cool thing is archaeologists have found the spot where this pool was, the Pool of Bethesda. So this looks a little differently, but see the rubble? They've marked out some of the places where they think the pool was located in there along the wall. They found like the cistern that holds the water. Okay, the cool thing is if this interests you, like, wow, that's really cool, they found that place that talks about in the Bible, you and your parents can go on YouTube, and there's several really neat videos that talk about the finding of the pool, and they show you where they have dug in Jerusalem. It's pretty neat. But for our story today, we're going to go ahead and use our blocks and our little people to tell the story. So we have the gate and we have the pool. And if we want pool, we have to put some water in the pool. And we have the people that have come to the pool in hopes to get in the pool to heal themselves. And we have one specific man that is in our story. There's a man in the story who had a mat. And this man, we're going to pretend it's this man was lame, which means he couldn't walk. And the Bible tells us that he had been lame for 38 years, which is a very long time. Now, back in Bible times, if you had any sort of disability or physically your body didn't work right, oftentimes your life was very hard because usually you ended up begging for people to give you money because you couldn't work. It would have been hard for this man whose legs didn't work to be able to be a farmer or to herd sheep. Those would have been hard jobs. So oftentimes people like this, they relied on their family to take care of them, and they relied on people giving them money to take care of them. So this man, it tells us, he had been lame for a long time, which means in the city of Jerusalem, people were probably used to seeing him around, maybe begging, and I don't know who brought him to the pool that day, but maybe one of his family members was able to pick him up and take him in his mat, and they kind of leave him by the edge of the pool of Bethesda. Well, I'm gonna put some more people in our story. Let's see, I'll put it right here. The pool was very crowded that day. And Jesus happens to be just passing by the area where the pool was, and he sees the man laying there. And he says to the man, "Would you like to walk?" And the man says, "Well, of course I'd like to walk. I was trying to get into the pool to heal me, but every time I tried to get in, other people would push their way in front of me and get in before me." And so he's probably thinking, hey, maybe this nice man, oh, this is important too, he does not recognize it's Jesus. He just thinks it's someone asked me. He's probably thinking, maybe this nice man will stop and help me get into the pool. Well, Jesus says, so he asks the man, "Do you want to get better?" And the man says, "Of course, but I can't get into the pool because people keep getting in before me." And he says, "Well, pick up your mat and you can be healed." And so something in this man believed what he had heard. So the man stands up, rolls up his mat, and is able to walk. Now, what a miracle that is. And I'm wondering if anyone was close by around him in the pool that day that heard. Well, Jesus, after this happens, Jesus just kind of walks away and goes back to wherever he was heading. Now, remember, this man had been lame for a long time. In walks the Jewish leaders. So we're going to use these farmers to represent the Jewish leaders. Now, you would think when the Jewish leaders see a man who couldn't walk before for many years walking, you'd think their reaction would be, "Oh my goodness, now you can walk." But that's not at all what their reaction is, because on the day this happened, it was the Sabbath. Now, if you'll remember, the Jewish people at the time followed all the rules, or tried to follow all the rules that were in the Old Testament scriptures. And one of those rules is you couldn't work on the Sabbath. Now, remember the people that we learned about, the Pharisees, those Jewish leaders of the temple? Well, remember the Jewish leaders believed, and this was the picture I showed you and hope you remember, they believed in the written law, what was in the Bible, what was in the Old Testament scriptures, and they also believed in oral law or traditions. So the written law would have been like, don't ride your bike in the street. But then remember, they came up with all these other laws on their own to keep you from disobeying. So, if they weren't supposed to work on the Sabbath day, the Jewish people, that means you were supposed to do absolutely nothing. Nothing at all. Not just like your regular work. You weren't supposed to do anything. And one of the things you weren't supposed to do on the Sabbath was pick up your mat. Doesn't seem like a big deal to us now, but that was a rule they had. On the Sabbath, you couldn't pick up your mat because that was work, and you weren't supposed to work on the Sabbath. So instead of being happy that the man was healed, the Jewish leaders got mad. So they walk over to the guy and they say to him, "Why are you picking up your mat and working on the Sabbath?" Guys, should not have been their response, but it was. And the man who was healed said, "Well, a man walked by, asked me if I wanted to be healed, and told me to pick up my mat. And so I did." And so the Jewish leaders said, "Well, who was this man?" And the man who had been lame said, "You know what? I don't really know. He walked up to me and he walked away really quickly. I don't know who it was." Well, the Jewish leaders were already talking. They probably already had an idea who it was. So, a few days later, you have to imagine we're in the temple now. A few days later, Jesus sees this same man, not at the pool of Bethesda, he sees the same man at the temple. And Jesus said, he talked to him and he said, "You can walk now, but be careful, because you need to get your life right and stop sinning so that you're not in danger anymore." And the man says, "Oh, it was Jesus," because now he recognizes him. "Oh, okay, so Jesus healed me." So this man right away, once he realized it was Jesus, goes to the Jewish leaders and tells them, "I know who it was that healed me now on the Sabbath. It was Jesus." Well, guess what? These Jewish leaders are angry again. Not only did this man pick up his mat, but Jesus was healing people on the Sabbath, which was against the rules. Jesus' response to them was, "I'm here to do my Father," that means God's, "work. And I'm trying to get it done," because Jesus knew what was coming. Boys and girls, the Jewish leaders missed it. They missed the important work that Jesus was doing in his short time here on earth. They missed it because they were all worried about the small detail of the man picking up the mat. They missed that Jesus had done a miracle because they were so worried about that one little detail, that the man had picked up his mat and had disobeyed, and they felt very, very angry about that. And the Jewish leaders began talking bad about Jesus because they felt like he wasn't following all their rules. Boys and girls, when Jesus came to earth, he changed everything. He was changing all the rules that the Jewish people had known and had followed in the past and had made up their own rules to follow the more rules. Jesus changed all of that. And I think if you try to think about it, remember we talked about hindsight, that word hindsight, about how it's easier to understand something looking back at it. We have hindsight in this story. So to us, we can look at the Jewish rulers and we think, you know what? Why didn't they say something else? Why would they be all upset about the mat and Jesus healing when Jesus was healing? Because we have hindsight. We know that Jesus was the promised Messiah, and we look back at all the stories about him and his healing, and we know that they are true. But the Jewish leaders at the time, they were still trying to figure it all out. And Jesus wasn't fitting what they thought the Messiah should be, because he was breaking their rules. And what Jesus was trying to explain to them is he didn't need to follow their rules. Jesus only had to obey God, and that they should trust him because he was working out God's bigger plan. Boys and girls, the same thing is true for us today. Just like this man who was lame could not heal himself, he couldn't even get into the pool to heal his aching body. We cannot heal ourselves either. We can't take away our sin. Nothing we can do, no dips in the pool, no kind things we do for other people can take away all of the sin that we have. Only one person can do that, and that person is Jesus. And it's important that we learn a lesson from the Jewish leaders. Don't get all worried about what everyone else is doing around you. Focus on you. Are you following Jesus? Are you obeying just like the lame man did? Do you have faith in Jesus? If you don't, I bet your parents would love to talk to you about that, about how you can trust Jesus with your whole life and how that we can trust him to take away all of our sins. All right. We were going to learn some more about Amy Carmichael, but I think I'm going to go ahead and save that for next week. Let's go ahead and review what our big picture question was for these lessons. Our big picture question is, why did God create people? And do you remember there were 3 reasons why God created people? Thought it might be kind of fun today if we made up some motions together about remembering why God created people. All right, so the first reason, God created people to worship him. Can you help me think of a good motion to remember worship him? What would you do? I had some ideas of like praying, because that's one way you can worship. Or like with your hands raised up, we can worship him. You can pick your own motion. So you think of what you want to do. All right, so God created people to, I'm going to wave my hands in the air because that looks like fun. God created people to worship him. Okay, our next reason is to love him. What could you do for the love him? What ideas do you have? Could do like love, right? Or you could make a heart with your hands. You pick your way. All right, I think I'm going with the heart. So let's go back. God created people to worship him, to love him. This was the one I had trouble with. To show his glory. What can we do for show his glory? I thought maybe like glory. Any other good ideas? All right, I'm gonna do big, like glory, glorious. All right, so let's go ahead and let's do our 3 reasons together and see if we can remember them. Ready? Why did God create people? God created people to worship him, to love him, and to show his glory. Kiddos, I hope you have a great week. I hope you do lots of fun things this summer. We're gonna have some nice weather this week, so I hope you get outside and play a ton. And I'll see you next Sunday. Bye.